Hello YouTube, Elmonster here, and I have for you guys today a really good and really close OU Wi-Fi battle. And if you guys would like to have a chance to battle me, then feel free to follow me on Twitter. My Twitter link is down in the description on all my videos, so you guys can follow me there and have a chance to battle me. Now, looking at team preview going into this match, the biggest threats I saw on my opponent's team were going to be that Keldeo and that Clefable, just because Keldeo, if it specs, is going to be hitting really hard, especially with the right predictions, and Clefable, if I allow it to set up, I could be in a very bad situation, especially if I lose my Charizard Y. So predicting him to lead off with his Magnezone, I lead off with my Kyurem. Reason being is that I actually have Earth Power on this Kyurem and I am Scarfed, which means if his Magnezone was Scarfed, I would outspeed him and potentially finish him off with the Earth Power, but he ends up leading off with Azumarill, and because Fusion Bolt does not OHKO Azumarill, I'm going to predict him to just go for the play rough, and I'm going to switch directly into my Charizard Y. I am modest max special attack Charizard Y, so he has absolutely no switch-ins to this Charizard on his team, so predicting him to switch out, which was a bit of a foolish thing for me to do, I decided to go for the Flamethrower. In hindsight, I probably should have gone straight for the Solar Beam, just because I pretty much contradicted myself with the first turn, thinking that he would switch out when he had no switch-ins, as he's able to get off a solid bit of amount of damage. I'm going to be forced to go for the Wrist of Fallen turn, thinking, okay, this turn he's going to switch out, predicting me to Solar Beam, but no, he stays in, goes for the knockoff, as I go for the modest Solar Beam in the sun. This is super effective to Azumarill, and it lives on what literally had to be 1%, and he's going to be able to finish off my biggest threat to his team fairly early on in the battle, and this is really not looking good for me because he does still have that Clefable, which if he plays it correctly will be able to sweep through my team after a few calm minds. So I'm going to head and bring in my Landers, and I'm just going to go for the safe U-turn because I don't want to give him a free switch into his Keldeo. So by U-turning on out into my Latios, I force him to want to bring in something else besides the Keldeo, as he ends up bringing in the Clefable. Obviously I cannot do any damage to this Clefable, so even though the switch into Scizor is very obvious, by bringing in Scizor, I will force him to either want to switch into Magnezone the Fallen turn, or as he does here, double switch into Magnezone, and then I'll be able to see if he turns out to be Scarfed or Specs, because if I'm not mistaken, Scarf Magnezone cannot OHKO Scizor with the spread that I'm running, and if he specs, he will be able to OHKO me. So because I was able to take the hit, I now know that he is most likely Scarfed, allowing me to U-turn on out into my Keldeo, which turned out to be the second biggest threat to his team behind my Mega Charizard Y, and I basically put him in a situation where he has to fodder something off because nothing on his team switches into my Keldeo, especially because I am choice specs. As he brings in Clefable, I get off a huge amount of damage, which is excellent because, as I mentioned, Clefable is one of the biggest threats to my team, especially after I lost my Charizard Y, and I'm basically in a situation where I can just go for another Hydro Pump because I really lose nothing in doing so, as long as I don't miss, of course. But it turns out that this Metagross is best friends with the Azumarill, and he lives on 1% as well, and I don't want to risk missing Hydro Pump, so I'm going to be forced to switch out as I bring in my Landorus. Unfortunately, I will not be able to get the Intimidate off, so if he did go for the Ice Punch this turn, the following turn, he would have been able to finish me off, but he actually just ends up going for the safe Bullet Punch, and then predicting him to predict me to maybe go for Stealth Rocks, thinking he would switch out. I'm actually going to go for the Earthquake because if he did have Ice Punch, I thought I may be able to live the hit because this is max defense, max HP Landorus, and then I can finish him off with Earthquake, and I no longer have to worry about the Metagross later in the battle. But he actually ends up switching directly into his own Landorus, telling me that okay, he doesn't have Ice Punch, which is some nice information, and I can just take this opportunity to get on my Stealth Rocks, which means I no longer have to worry about the Metagross anymore in this match as he gets up his own Stealth Rocks. It turns out that I'm actually going to go before him as I go for the U-turn, which in most situations would be bad, but because I still have Scizor, I can switch that in to see what he wants to go for, and if he does end up going for the U-turn, I will be able to get switch initiative, which is going to be very beneficial to me because I can know what he's going to want to bring in. However, though, I did want to save Scizor for later in the match to potentially fodder off to the Magnezone or the Keldeo to see what move they would want to lock themselves into, because normally Keldeos nowadays are either Scarfed or Specs. As he brings in the Keldeo, I have a perfect switching in the form of my Latios, and because I am running a bit of HP EVs, even if he turns out to be Specs, he's not going to be able to finish me off with a crit. Actually, I don't think he'd be able to knock me out with a crit in general, even if I wasn't running HP EVs, but it's fine because I can just take this opportunity to go for the Psyshock, and thankfully I'm going to be able to finish off this Clefable. So I managed to pressure his team with my Keldeo and then finish off this Clefable with my Latios, which is excellent because now the only real Pokemon I have to worry about is his Keldeo, which as long as I have Latios, I should be able to keep Keldeo in check as he brings in the Landers. Unfortunately, Draco Meteor will not be able to finish him off at the amount of HP that he's at, so expecting him to want to go for the U-turn, I decided to switch directly into my Kyurem Black, thinking, okay, he may want to U-turn now into the Magnezone because I'm Scarfed, I'll outspeed him and finish him off with Earth Power, but no, he turns out to have the knockoff, which did not at all cross my mind when I switched in Kyurem Black, which really sucks because he now gets rid of my Scarf Pokemon and the fastest Pokemon on my team, which means that Keldeo, if I lose my Latios, will be able to outspeed my entire team and finish me off. So I ended up going for the Draco on the off chance that he would want to switch out. Originally, that was supposed to be Outrage, but I didn't change it, so yeah, it doesn't really matter. It's now Outrage, but yeah, I went for Draco. I wanted to get damage on whatever game in. As he brings in the Keldeo, again, I have a perfect switch in the form of Maladia, so I'm going to go ahead and bring her in. As his Secret Sword does a pretty nice bit of damage, but I'm thinking that he's actually not Specs, because if he was Specs, he definitely would have done more damage than about 20 or 25%. So I'm thinking maybe he's Scarfed and he's running double Scarfers, which is a little bit odd, but I have seen that a lot recently. So I'm gonna go ahead and go for the Draco Meteor because I know the switch into Magnezone is fairly obvious, and I just really want to start weakening it so I can prevent him from being able to constantly switch it in to my Latios as I go for Psyshock or Draco Meteors. So predicting him to want to go for a Volt Switch or a Flash Cannon, I decided just to fodder off my Kyurem Black. This way I can make the appropriate switch back into whatever move he wanted to go for. But he actually ends up pulling a double switch into the Keldeo, which, you know what, I'm perfectly fine with, just because I can't just leave in my Kyurem for Death Fodder, as he's going to be able to finish me off with a Hydro Pump. I know that he's choice in some sort of way. I'm thinking that he's definitely Scarfed, which means I can now get a free switch into my own Keldeo, and much like earlier in the match, I basically put him in a situation where he either has to fodder something off, or he can risk taking about 60 to 50% to his own Keldeo from my Specs Keldeo. So he does decide to fodder off his Magnezone. Thankfully, I do not miss the Hydro Pump, and I'm going to be able to straight up knock out Magnezone at the amount of speed that he's at. As he brings back in the Keldeo, again, I'm thinking that he's Scarfed, so I can definitely live any one move that he wants to go for. So what I'm going to do is just stay in, get off as much damage as I can with the Hydro Pump. Plus, there's a chance that he maybe will want to pull a double switch, although I don't know why he would do that. But just either way, in my opinion, just going straight for the Hydro Pump was the better play in this situation, because I still want to keep my Landers around to take on his Landers, and I don't want to switch in my Latios to take any unnecessary damage. So after going for the Hydro Pump, I'm going to go ahead and bring in my Landers, thinking, okay, he probably has Hidden Power Electric. No, it turns out that he has Hidden Power Grass, which I was not at all expecting, because normally the Hidden Power that Keldeo run are Electric, Ghost, or Dark in some weird scenarios. But no, he turns out to have Hidden Power Grass. As I go for the U-turn, I'm going to be able to U-turn on now into my Latios, and I will basically just be able to click Psyshock, and then with his last Pokemon being Landers, if he does want to switch it in on a Psyshock, he will not be able to take a Draco Meteor after the Stealth Rocks and Psyshock damage. So he does end up going for the Hidden Power Grass, as a Psyshock will be able to finish him off, and at this point his last Pokemon is going to be the Landers, which, even though I will not be able to one-shot Landers at the amount of HP that is at, because I do still have Keldeo, I will be able to bring that in, outspeed it, and in return finish it off with any move that I want to go for. So I am going to go for the Draco Meteor, and I believe if I was actually max special attack, this Draco Meteor would have actually been able to finish off Landers, but I do like to have that extra little bit of bulk on Latios to be able to switch into Keldeo's, Magnezones, and any other stabbed hits that Latios resists. So yeah, in the end, it's not really game changing in the slightest or whatsoever. And Keldeo can come in, outspeed, and finish it off with Scald. I actually really wanted to go for the Icy Wind, but knowing my luck, I would have missed. So as much as it pains me, I have to go for Scald, and that is going to be the 2-0 victory in my favor. So yeah, that was definitely a good game. I was really upset though, because I based this team around Mega Charizard Y, and like 10 turns into the match, it just got utterly destroyed because I mispredicted going against what I was thinking, and just Yeah, it's really upsetting, but in the end, I definitely did enjoy the match, and if you guys enjoyed it as well, then make sure to hit the like button down below, guys. The support is, of course, appreciated, and it does indeed help the channel grow. So with that being said, I will see you all tomorrow, so later, everybody.